Thank you, Ardesh, for such an insightful sharing. I think it really helps to put some numbers on what everybody knows, right? We know the internet economy is the economy of tomorrow, but when you look at the word 1 trillion, that quantifies for us the opportunities available. Now, we have seen the policy, the strategy insights. We have seen some really hard data produced by Bain. But what about real story of transformation? And here, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our next SGTech counselor, Ms. Jamie Tan. She is the co-chair of EdTech Committee, SGTech, and she's also the CEO and founder of Flying Cape Technologies. Now, Jamie is not just a CEO and founder of Flying Cape Technologies, she is also winner of the Women Entrepreneur Award in 2018, as well as the winner of the Startup Leader of the Year, Movers and Shakers category. And she is helping to build education and community ecosystems of tomorrow. And she's here with us today to share the transformation story from education to edtech. Thank Jamie, please.
Testing. Hi, very good morning to everyone. Very nice to be able to meet everyone physically, and to the folks on the Zoom, very good morning as well. So the topic that I have today is to share a little bit about the transformation of the education industry. And you know, this morning we saw it on a global level. Now we'll zoom a little bit into what has happened over the education industry over the past 2 years. And the reason why I chose this topic is really 3 reasons. Regardless of your age, from formalized education for the young to adult lifelong learning, essentially education is really an industry that impacts individuals of all ages. The education industry has gone through significant transformation over the past 2 years. And I'd like to share with you a little bit of our journey. Hopefully, the insights you can take, you know, the similarities and differences to your industry. What are the takeaways and learnings that can be applied to your business? Before I start, I'd like to maybe give you a quick introduction of who I am. So I'm the founder of Flying Cape. Flying Cape is a technology company that focuses on building tools to drive education and build global communities. We currently power over 10 smart education marketplace. You can think of it like Lazada for education, with over 2,000 merchants and serving learners from all ages across 39 countries. Prior to starting Flying Cape in 2015, I spent 15 years in the corporate world. You know, I had opportunity to live in China and Taiwan. And my last role was head of IT for an American MNC heading over Asia Pacific. So you can consider me as a tech geek. On a personal level, I'm really passionate about education, hence Flying Cape, technology, and solving real-world problems. Okay, enough about me. Now let's talk about the education industry. You might be thinking in your head, the first question will be, so how big is the education industry really? Let me share with you some numbers. So a recent report stated that the education industry globally and will enjoy a 30% year-on-year growth and hit USD 10 trillion by 2030. That's on the demand side. Let's take a look at the supply side and from a national perspective in Singapore. Unfortunately, at the time when the survey was being conducted, it was reported that the education industries or the merchants within Singapore, 45% were still relying on manual processes and what we call traditional marketing. So if you consider, you know, the growth in the demand and where we were at that point in time, you know, we were expecting to head into a scenario where we would be missing out on the needs for the global economy and learners going forward. So over the next 15 minutes, I'm going to share a little bit about the breakdown of our journey on the education industry side using a timeline approach. We're going to break it down into 4 phases. We'll talk about how the Singapore education industry was like up to the end of 2019. And then we're going to deep dive into 2020, where we're going to break it into 2 segments, what we saw during the circuit breaker, and then followed by, Q3 2020, where we entered into phase 2, phase 3, we call it phase X, and the future of education industry. Before I do that, I'm going to start off with a little bit of a framework, and we call it the DT framework. So when we talk about digitization and transformation, 4 words come into mind. DT stands for digitization, integration, transformation, and innovation. So what do I mean by that? So if I were to give a 1-sentence summary of that, when I think about digitization, I think about technology helping us to do our work today better. That's a little bit moving away from manual and paper processes, being more efficient. Next, when I think about integration, I think about not reinventing the wheel, so finding the best tool that fits your needs. So today, you may have, a customized business administration system that is perfect for your business, but you may be using, best of breed sort of solutions out there. For example, General Ledger, you'll be using QuickBooks, Xero. There's no reason for you to actually build a customized system for that. And so integration is something that all of us basically will think about in our daily business. Followed by that, transformation. So transformation is a little bit about really marrying your business processes with your technology and making sure that you are able to get the best of the breed. And last but not least, innovation. And innovation, you can see it from 2 broad strokes. For example, ideas, innovative ideas, products, services, and other offerings, as well as how do you innovate in terms of your execution? How do you reach to an international market? So all in all, I would say innovation, it all comes into the sky's the limit. It's all about the mindset. Okay, let's move on to, up to education industry up to end of 2019. So in a nutshell, you see Singapore education system is widely respected worldwide. We have a thriving private education industry, which is largely dominated by brick and mortar business, and a relatively low adoption of technology when it comes to that, based on the numbers we saw for both public and private sector. And as a result of that, investments on the edutech space were really flowing to countries elsewhere, such as China and India. And in the subsequent slide, I'll share with you a little bit of what that looks like. So if I were to summarize what adoption of technology looked like for the education industry in Singapore, I would say that, pre-COVID, up to the end of 2019, we were in the digitization phase. We had larger corporations on the education front that had the financial muscle power to think about digitization. And their mindset was actually into 2 places. Firstly, how do I become more efficient? How do I cut down my operation cost, be more savvy on removing manpower dependency with the tech crunch and talent crunch and so on. And on the marketing front, you're thinking about how do I expand my reach to local communities. So those were the mindset at that point in time with regards to basically technology in the education space. But before I end, this era, right? I'm going to share a little bit about, moving a bit about the rosy picture. And despite having a great reputation in Singapore for the education space, my takeaway was, but what got us here may not get us there. And what do I mean by that? So I'm going to give a little bit of an example. I'm going to use one example to share a little bit about that. And, there are many examples to supplement that. So as many of you may have heard, there is a PISA assessment that is conducted every average 3 years. And it's actually for the 15-year-old student segments across various countries. And Singapore has made a very steady climb to the top. And each year, in terms of the assessment for science, reading, and math, Singapore has been on the top place. So that has been one of the reasons why, our education system very, very well respected in the country, in worldwide. However, in the last PISA test in 2018, as some of you may know, we lost the first place in that segment, and it was overtaken by, you can see BSJZ China, which stands for Beijing, Shanghai, Jiangsu, and Chengdu. So I won't go into the details about, what that really meant for us and the controversy around that. But essentially, in 2018, we were moved from the first to the second place. Still a very strong position. But on that note, I'll give some positive news. That aside from basically, measurements of science, reading, and math, PISA, for example, recognized that the global economy of the future will require a lot more measurements in terms of global competency. And so, I'm very pleased to tell you that Singapore still maintained our first lead when it came to global competency ranking. So in terms of building global citizens of tomorrow, awareness of global issues and intercultural skills, Singapore actually achieved top places. So on that note, I'm going to end the 2019 period as we head straight into 2020. I intentionally keep this 2020 slide very, very short because I think we all remember how it felt like. But in long story short, in the early part of 2020, we already were hearing about news coming from China, but we didn't quite understand how that pandemic was going to affect us. When March rolled around and the circuit breaker was kicked into action, we went to work from home, to learn from home, your acronyms, work from home, HBL, and so on and so forth. Essentially, the schools closed. And as a platform business, with a large portion of our, partners not being online and physical, we suffered along with them. So in the first two quarters, we saw massive cancellations, refunds, reschedule, and nobody really understood the impact of this. From a technology adoption standpoint, the schools basically scrambled to find solutions to really maintain their existing business, to continue serving their existing students. And in our mind, we were thinking, how long will this pandemic last? So I have a really nice quote that I saw from Gupta, the CEO of Mercer, and he basically summarized the sentiments at that point. He said, we have to brace up for similar shutdowns in the future, and that going online or having the ability to go online is imperative. Of course, he summarized, the education ecosystem, not only in Singapore but globally, had always had the technology available to adopt. But we took our time in doing it. And now is the time to come to accelerate the entire process. Under that background, I would say that the education industry really rallied together. And we moved into the learning stage for us as a whole, right? So Flying Cape and many distribution and many partners, conducted bootcamp series like Google and so on, really to aim to bring up the competency of our businesses over this period. And so the things that were covered in terms of learning range from theory lessons on the definition of synchronous, asynchronous, blended learning, so that we were all speaking the same terminology, to learning how to choose the right tools for your enrichment needs and how you want to teach your students, and even the hope of the future. How you can then, with your new technology ability, think about expanding your reach virtually overseas. At the end of the combined efforts from the industry partners and the sharing across all the education centers, what we saw was we moved effectively from a very low adoption of online technology to almost 51% doing something online during the period of quarter 2 of 2020, with 37% of our education partners thinking about already starting on that. So we've really, moved the needle on this front. But take a look on the other side where you talk about conferencing solutions. In a quick bit to actually pick technology up, basically there is, when your business processes is not fully, in sync with the technology, right? Many people actually reported that they were still having difficulties adjusting, and that really talks through the transformation stage. So now we're going to end the critical period and move into Q3 2020 and the rest of 2021. So what happened? By Q4 2020, Flying Cape saw the biggest jump in growth because by that time, all education partners had found a way to go online, and we were able to grow with them. We also saw MOE for the first time open an invitation to edutech companies to come on board and share a little bit about their technical solutions and possibly how to apply that to the mainstream education. I said new definition here, and what I really meant was the definition of an edutech company had already started changing at that point. In the past, you would think of technology companies that were focused on education, you define them as edutech, but really a massive shift was happening. The brick and mortar education companies were starting to be huge adopters of technology and reinventing the wheel in terms of what they could do for education. And I have two numbers here, which I would like to share a little bit. So the bookings in July, at that point in time, 90% were still going online, 10% were going face-to-face because, the restrictions were coming down. But by September, we expected a shift back of people going back to physical classes, but a whopping 65% still stayed online. And there are two reasons for that. The first, of course, families or individuals were thinking, is it safe for me to go back to the physical class? But within the 65%, actually showed a change in mindset as well. Individuals were going, hey, online classes is not too bad. Maybe I'll stay on with that. So as we moved into, as an industry, into the transformation era, a couple of statistics could be seen. In 2021, a survey indicated that over 70% of brick and mortar centers had become digitized and were already investing in customized online classroom solutions and embracing and innovations in AI, machine learning, really changing the way people were learning. And businesses on their own in the education space were also thinking about how should I change my business model to tap on new opportunities. And that could exist about, reaching out to global students overseas. But also a whopping 13% actually said, I'm going to move away from my brick and mortar business and I'm going to transit fully online. So with that setting in mind, we're now moving into year 22 and beyond, the future. Well, I will summarize it into three portions. Firstly, as an industry, we have now come to a better consensus on the role that technology plays when it comes to education. We no longer think that technology will completely replace the teacher. We understand that technology will be a great supplement to supporting teachers and that involvement will vary across your different age groups. Number two, by going online, we've moved into the ability to think about greater opportunities, but as well as challenges of tomorrow. And last but not least, we expect the education industry to come up with greater innovation in terms of how people learn, from different products, services, as well as a corresponding willingness by the mainstream consumer to adopt these solutions. And as a natural outcome of that, greater investments into the edutech space. So let me step through it very quickly. The future of learning accelerated. So there was a great article by Straits Times sometime at the end of 2021, on the top there, which really talked about, what the future of learning is. And we've come to the terminology of sort of blended learning, a combination of online learning and face-to-face learning and a few other things. So a couple of quotes that I took out from the article. I'll start from the bottom one. So we've seen firsthand how online face-to-face learning and technology can go a long way to encourage greater engagement, higher levels of information retention, and even spark self-motivation when it comes to learning. Now, if we were not forced into the COVID-19 pandemic, we wouldn't have been able to put this to test in a large scale. And this was really a consensus that was met on the education front. And the report also talked a bit about how education centers have really fought back the pandemic with innovative responses. So including in creating new products, going fully digital, and even bringing in new foreign programs. So, which brings me to my second point. Now we know learning is no longer constrained by geographical boundaries. Overnight, being online, you actually see that your immediate consumer customer base went from local to the whole entire world. So as local education providers are thinking about looking to expand their virtual reach overseas, we see 73% of education partners signing on to say, yes, I'm willing and looking forward to expand. But at the same time, you do get a clear message, shape up or shift out. Because while this is happening, you have an increasing number of overseas entrants penetrating the Singapore market. So, if you don't shift up, what's going to happen, right? So today in Singapore, if you want to learn music, you can do it from your home, from London. You can learn robotics from India, art from China, and so on. The offerings and the products and services for the general consumer has just expanded exponentially. My last point on the investment side is talking about numbers. And you can see that there's a general increase exponentially. Let's focus on the 2020 and the 2021 numbers. So from 2019, the investment into the edutech space pretty much more than doubled. And the proportion of the investments that were going in were largely going into the red portion, which is China, and India in the green, and the blue USA. But come 2021, a huge shift in terms of the investments started happening. With the China regulations kicking in on the education space, you see a huge drop. While, and investment into China, while the USA actually, started taking a larger portion of that share, India remains strong. But let's look at the rest of the world. The rest of the world, including edutech companies within Singapore, are now enjoying a greater push in terms of attention and investment. So, in summary, as you think about digital transformation, I would like to say that the truth is, there is no one-size-fits-all approach. And yes, we recognize every business is unique. But if I were to end this talk today with 4 guiding principles about digital transformation, it would be this. As you think about digital transformation, think about where you are as a business or your industry is in terms of technology adoption today. And in that, you think about the DT framework. Are you in digitization, integration, transformation, or innovation? And yes, in every project, we do think about different components of that within the same project. But on a larger scale, on a macro scale, in achieving a project objective, you can, this would really help you to get clarity on your objective as well as the outcome of a technology adoption. Then step 3 really is best processes. So we think about our business process today and what technology can do to help us do better. And so we constantly think about maybe technology being adapted to our business processes. But in reality, to get the best results, sometimes we also need to think about what needs to change today for our business processes to be able to get the best of technology. And the parting last point that I have today is that once you start on a technology journey, it's not a one-off project. It's going to be an iterative process that will continue as you target to catch new opportunities or address new challenges. So, thank you for your time today. My name is Jamie, and this is my contact information. If you would like to talk about digital transformation or find out a little bit more about the education industry, I invite you to actually get in touch with me. Thank you.